The streets of Washington buzzed with celebration. Flags rippled in the summer air. Children perched on shoulders waved miniature banners, while brass bands filled the avenues with patriotic hymns. The National Veteran Parade had drawn thousands, an event meant to honor service members across generations. President Donald Trump was scheduled to appear, but the spotlight that day wasn't meant for politics. It belonged to the veterans lining the front rows, some in crisp uniforms, others wearing faded caps that bore the weight of decades. Among them stood a young Marine in full dress blues, Lance Corporal Mason Ridge, 23 years old, spine straight, eyes steady. No one knew what he planned to do, not his squad mates, not his mother, not even the reporters who had briefly spoken with him earlier that morning. To them, he was just another proud Marine. Inside, though, Mason carried a burden few could see. As the presidential motorcade approached, the cheers grew louder. Secret Service agents scanned the crowd. When President Trump stepped out of the vehicle and waved, Mason moved. He stepped forward, directly into the street, directly into the president's path. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Agents reacted instantly, but Trump raised a hand, signaling them to stop. He tilted his head, calm but curious. "Marine," he said into the microphone, "you have something to say." The crowd fell silent. Mason nodded once and drew a breath. His voice, when it came, was steady but trembling beneath the surface. "Sir, no disrespect. I stand here today not for myself, but for someone whose voice you never got to hear." The silence deepened. Even the birds overhead seemed to pause. "She was a Marine, too," Mason continued. "Corporal Lily Brennan. 2 tours, Afghanistan and Iraq. She saved my life and the lives of 2 others when our convoy was hit." Trump's brow furrowed. "Go on," he said quietly. "When she came home," Mason said, his voice tightening. No one listened. "She struggled with PTSD. She asked for help again and again. She was denied." He swallowed hard. "6 months ago, I found her. She took her own life in her garage." Gasps and murmurs spread through the crowd. A veteran in the front row wiped his eyes. A woman behind Mason pressed a hand to her chest. "She left a letter," Mason said. It said, "I didn't die in war. I died in silence." His voice cracked. "Mr. President, I don't want medals. I don't want honors. I want to know, why wasn't her life treated like it mattered? Why wasn't her pain enough?" Trump stood frozen. Seconds passed, long ones. Then the president stepped forward, moving past the agents until he stood face to face with a young Marine. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mason Ridge, so." Trump nodded, then placed a hand on Mason's shoulder. "I don't have the right words," he said softly. "No president ever really does. But I hear you, and more importantly, I believe you." The crowd murmured. Cameras flashed, but Trump didn't look away. "You reminded us," he said into the microphone, "that honoring service doesn't end on the battlefield. It must continue when the war follows our heroes home." Applause erupted. Mason hesitated, then pulled a folded envelope from his pocket. "This was Lily's letter," he said. "I've held on to it, but I think you need to read it more than I do." Trump accepted it carefully. "I'll read it tonight," he promised, "and I won't forget her name." Then, unexpectedly, the president saluted, not as a politician, but as a citizen. Mason stood motionless, tears streaming down his face. That night, in the quiet of the White House residence, Trump sat alone in his study. The letter trembled in his hands. "To whoever finds this," it began, "I hope you're someone who can do what I couldn't, be heard." Lily wrote of sleepless nights, of sounds that never faded, of friends she couldn't save, of phone calls that led to voicemail and denials. "I wore the uniform with pride," she wrote, "but when I needed help, I was told to toughen up." Trump folded the letter and pressed it to his chest. "We failed her," he whispered. A tear slid down his cheek. The next morning, Mason sat alone in his apartment, surrounded by Lily's photos and medals. He hadn't slept, but the weight on his chest felt lighter. His phone rang. "The president requested a meeting today," a woman said. "At noon." At the White House, Trump stood as Mason entered. "I read her letter," Trump said. I couldn't sleep. He paused. I want to start something. A real solution. We'll call it the Lilly Project. A national initiative, mental health care, transition support, rapid response teams. I want your help, Trump said. Mason's breath caught. She never would have believed this. Then let's make sure no veteran ever feels that alone again. Within days, the Lilly Project was trending worldwide. Veterans shared their stories. Families shared their losses. Mason received a call from Lily's mother. She would be so proud of you, she said through tears. She saved me once, Mason replied. I just wanted the world to know her name. She's finally being heard, her mother whispered. At the National Gallery of Art, Lily's painting after war was unveiled, a woman in uniform staring into a mirror, her reflection exhausted, hollow, human. Veterans stood silently before it. Trump signed an executive order commissioning copies for VA centers nationwide. Let this be a mirror, he said, of what we miss and what we must now fix. Late one night, Mason received a call from a stranger. I was going to end things tonight, the young man said, but I saw Lily's painting. Mason stayed on the line for an hour. Help arrived before dawn. Days later, a text came. I started drawing. She inspired me. Mason stared at the message, then whispered, You saved another one, Lily. He saluted her photo. We're just getting started. A week after the parade, the White House held a closed-door roundtable with veterans from every branch. No cameras, no speeches, just listening. And for the first time in a long time, the silence wasn't empty. It was healing. Mason wasn't invited as a guest. He was invited as a co-host. When he entered the Roosevelt Room, 30 veterans sat around the long table. Some wore tailored suits, others jeans and worn boots. A few sat in wheelchairs. Some carried visible scars. All of them carried the same thing, the weight of experience, and a quiet hope that maybe, this time, someone was finally listening. President Trump entered without fanfare. No cameras. No press. I'm not here to talk, he said. I'm here to listen. And for the next 2 hours, that's exactly what he did. A Marine spoke about waiting 18 months for a PTSD counselor. A Navy veteran told the story of his friend who died by suicide after being denied treatment, twice. A female Air Force officer described the invisible wounds that never made it into her record, but haunted her every day. When it was Mason's turn, he didn't speak about Lily right away. Instead, he looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes. This, he said quietly, is what should have happened years ago. We should have had this table, these ears, this attention. But now that we do, we don't waste it. Silence followed, then slow nods. Trump stood. Every one of you is part of the Lilly Project now. We'll fund it. We'll legislate. But more importantly, we'll listen. You earned that, and so did she. No one clapped. No one needed to. They weren't there for applause. They were there to build something that would outlive them. Weeks later, Mason was invited to Arlington National Cemetery. As he approached, his breath caught. A new memorial wall curved gently in white stone. At its center, a name was carved in fresh granite. Lance Corporal Lily Brennan. She fought battles we couldn't see. Below her name were dozens of others, veterans lost to suicide. For the first time, their sacrifice was honored openly, not hidden in shame, but lifted with dignity. Families gathered quietly. Some held flowers. Others held each other. Mason spotted Lily's mother. She smiled gently, took his hand. She was always afraid of being forgotten, she said softly. Now she's part of something bigger than we ever dreamed. Nearby, a young girl, maybe 10, stood with her father, a retired soldier. She pointed at Lily's name. Daddy, who was she? He answered without hesitation. A hero, sweetheart, the kind we need to remember. Tears filled Mason's eyes. Later, Trump arrived alone, without security. He stood silently before the wall. No speech, no cameras, just respect. Then he turned to Mason. Every president gets remembered for something. I hope I'm remembered for this. Mason didn't reply. He simply saluted, because in that moment, the past wasn't being erased. It was finally being acknowledged, and that mattered more than any speech. That night, Mason returned to his apartment and found an envelope in his mailbox. Mr. Mason Ridge, hero friend of Lily. Inside was a crayon drawing and a letter written in uneven handwriting. Dear Mason, my name is Ellie. I'm 8 years old. My big brother is a Marine. He's sad a lot and doesn't talk much. But when we saw you and Lily on the news, he cried. Then he hugged me. He said he was going to be okay. I think Lily helped him. I drew her as an angel. Love, Ellie. The drawing was simple. Lily in uniform, wings spread, a bright halo above her smiling face. Mason sat down slowly, hands shaking. This little girl had captured what thousands of words never could. Lily had become more than a tragedy. She had become hope. He framed the picture beside Lily's painting and wrote in his journal, Lily, you always wanted to change the world. You thought you couldn't. But you did, more than you ever knew. The apartment still felt empty. But now, it also felt full of meaning. Because Lily wasn't gone. She was everywhere. A month later, Mason visited Lily's grave just after sunrise. He wore his Marine dress blues, white lilies in one hand, her folded flag in the other. He knelt and placed the flowers beneath her headstone. I know you hated attention, he whispered, but I had to speak. You deserved it. We all did. He told her about Ellie, about the wings. I think she was right. A breeze moved through the trees. Mason pulled Lily's dog tag from his jacket. I'm going to keep this, he said softly, if that's okay. He stood, saluted, and whispered, I miss you, but your mission isn't over, and neither is mine. For the first time, the weight lifted. 6 weeks later, the first Lily Brennan Mental Health and Recovery Center opened near Fort Bragg. It didn't feel like a hospital. It felt like home, sunlight, art, quiet rooms, even pets. Lily's painting after war hung on every wall. The main corridor was called Brennan Way. This isn't just a building, Mason said. It's a promise that no one fights alone anymore. A nervous young soldier entered with a duffel bag. A staff member smiled and led him inside. No judgment, no red tape, just help. Exactly what Lily had wanted. That afternoon, Mason sat in the garden and saw a familiar face. Sergeant Jax Monroe. I saw the speech, Jax said. Took me a while to come back. Mason nodded. I'm glad you did. She would have hated the attention, Jax said with a soft laugh. But she'd love that you gave us our voice back. Before leaving, Jax said, I want to help. I got stories too. It's not just about Lily anymore, Mason replied. Jax grinned. No, it's about all of us. The Lily Brennan Act passed unanimously. Veterans began sharing their stories nationwide. Silence turned into conversation. Shame turned into strength. One man told Mason, I was going to end my life. Now I run a support group. Mason hugged him, because sometimes presence matters more than words. Years later, a bronze statue stood outside the original center, Lily in Marine fatigues, a paintbrush in one hand, a rifle in the other. She painted the truth. A recruit asked, was she really just a painter? Mason smiled. She was a warrior with her heart. As the recruits walked away, Mason saluted the statue, not for the friend he lost, but for the hero the world gained. And in the quiet, it felt like the wind whispered, I'm still here,